The story begins by introducing John May, a middle-aged man who lived a simple life and always dressed neatly in a clean suit. His life followed the same order every day and mostly without any changes. Every day he would come home to his quiet little flat, prepare the exact same simple dinner, and sit down alone at the dining table to eat it because he had no family and no friends. Besides his boring day, John actually worked in the city council office, where his duties were different from other employees. He was responsible for taking care of the bodies of the deceased, specifically those who had died alone without any relatives or friends to claim them. However, for John, this wasn't a job, his calling for respect. Whenever the council office had a death case, John would go to the deceased's residence to carefully check the room, hoping to find some form of family identification, letters, or contacts he could use. He would also meticulously collect personal items such as old photographs or even small objects that could give a bit of information about who the person was during their lifetime. Despite this, no one ever asked him to go that far for the deceased, yet he still did it patiently. As much as possible, he would then try to find the deceased's family or friends just so the person would not be alone when they were buried. After all of his job finding information about the deceased, John would also compile their life histories. If he couldn't find the family or friends of the deceased, he would write a short obituary for them himself in respectful language to be read by the priest at the church. He did that because he strongly felt the person deserved to be remembered, even if only through a few words. Every funeral he arranged was almost always quiet without any mourners or family members. Most of the time, it would only be him who stood there and gave a prayer. Sometimes, he himself would read the farewell words in front of the deceased's grave, and he did all of this sincerely. When his superior told John to cremate the bodies, he would still go as far as attempting to arrange a proper funeral service first, because in his mind, no matter how insignificant the deceased's life seemed, they still deserved a dignified farewell. Along with that, he was also often tasked with scattering the ashes of people who had been cremated according to their will. John's days consistently followed the same pattern. He started by waking up early in his small flat and then went to the office. Every time he sat down at his desk, he would open a new death file with calm and filled with concentration, as if his job was the most important thing in the world. He had handled several different cases. There was an old man who passed away alone in his chair at home. There was a woman who died in a cramped apartment without anyone knowing she was there. There were also homeless people whose deaths came unexpectedly on the streets. No matter what kind of person the deceased was, he would handle the case with the utmost seriousness. John often entered the residences of the deceased and searched carefully. He was there not to look for treasure or valuables, but rather for information about the life of the deceased. He would meticulously place small objects into envelopes to be collected, ranging from old photos, old postcards, or even unsent letters. For him, all of these items represented a piece of the person's story, and it was worth keeping. At home, John would arrange these objects carefully. He even had a photo album containing a portrait of every person he had helped with the funeral, as if he were making a museum of memories that only he cared about. No one else ever saw the results of his efforts, but he still performed this same thing every day. Every funeral he attended was almost the same every time. There was no one else present beside him, who stood solemnly at the side of the coffin, reading a short prayer he had prepared himself. Even the gravediggers knew very well that John was always the only one present to accompany the body to its final resting place. This sincere dedication stood in stark contrast to his colleagues at the office. They basically believed that the job of caring for a corpse should be quick, uncomplicated, and not detailed. Meanwhile, John held the principle that every life, no matter how small, deserved to end with dignity. One day, John handled the case of a person who had died alone in his apartment. The body was found when the neighbors became suspicious because of a bad smell coming from the house. Upon investigation, it was estimated that the man had been dead for weeks. Then, while investigating the apartment, John found out that the deceased was named Billy Stokes. Following his usual routine, he then collected several items that might help him find the deceased's relatives. After leaving Billy's apartment, John was called by his boss, Mr. Pratchett, to his office. Upon meeting, with a cold face and formal tone, his boss delivered the bitter news that John's position would be removed because the local government considered his work to be too slow and too costly, as he had organized too many funerals instead of cheaper cremations. Upon hearing the news, John didn't say anything against it. He didn't argue or show anger, but rather stared with a resigned expression. His job might have been considered trivial by others, but for him, It was his whole life, and now it was coming to an end. However, before he was officially dismissed, Mr. Pratchett allowed him to solve Billy Stokes' case. Since this was his last job, John dedicated himself more seriously than ever because he wanted a perfect ending to the work he had been doing for 20 years. He then started his little investigation by checking the objects he had found in Billy's flat one by one. There were old photos whose colors had faded, old letters, and even several addresses written on worn paper. Each piece was like a faint trace of the past that he had to follow. From some clues in the photos, John decided to head out of town to visit Billy's old neighborhood before he moved to London. His journey took him to various places, such as the bar that Billy used to visit, and then to his old workplace at a cake factory, where Billy had worked until he was fired. During his visit to the factory, John met Billy's former co-worker named Shakti. According to Shakti, Billy was fired from the cake factory because he was caught urinating in a bucket of dough, which was later used to make cakes. Shortly after, before leaving the factory, John invited Shakti to attend Billy's funeral, but unfortunately, Shakti refused. From meeting Shakti, John learned a little about Billy's life, which revealed that he was a troubled man who liked to get drunk and cause trouble, leading people to avoid him. However, he was also a human being who once had youth, friendship, and even love. John didn't give up on his investigation yet. He went in and out of stores nearby to ask if anyone knew Billy, until eventually he met a woman named Mary, who turned out to be Billy's ex-girlfriend, although she ended up married to someone else. When they chatted, Mary's husband recounted that Billy once put someone's hand in hot oil because the person had been rude to Mary when they were still dating back then. But when John revealed that Billy had died, Mary and her current husband were somehow relieved that he was dead. At that moment, John was shocked when he learned the fact that when Billy left, Mary had been pregnant with his child that he never knew. After that, before leaving, John asked Mary to come to Billy's funeral and bring his child and grandchildren. However, Mary refused to get involved in anything related to Billy at all. Another day at the office, Mr. Pratchett showed up at John's office and reminded John that his time was almost up and insisted it would be better if Billy were instead cremated rather than having an arranged funeral because, for him, the dead no longer needed attention. But John begged Mr. Pratchett for more time, as this was his last case. Later that afternoon, John tried to call the police station where Billy had once been jailed. To get more information, he decided to go to the station in person instead. However, when he asked about Billy, the warden told him that because the incident had happened 17 years ago, the files had been moved, and thanks to that, John couldn't find the list of visitors who might have seen Billy while he was in the detention cell. However, the prison warden suggested John try visiting the Ministry of Home Affairs office, as all files for the last 2 decades were kept there. So, armed with that, John decided to go to the Ministry of Home Affairs office. Upon checking through several old letters there, John eventually discovered an important fact that Billy had once had a daughter named Kelly Stokes, and the letter had a complete address of hers. He then decided to meet Kelly in person to tell her about Billy, but to avoid getting rejected yet again, he knew he had to try a different approach. He suspected all the photos of the little girl in Billy's old album, which he found in the apartment, were of Kelly when she was a kid. So, John carefully put all of Kelly's photos back together in a new album and brought that to meet Kelly. Armed with the address, John searched for Kelly, and after a long search, he found out that Kelly worked at a dog shelter. When they finally met, John immediately told her that Billy, her father, had died. Kelly was shocked to hear the news that her father had passed away. However, because she never had a good relationship with her father, and her childhood was full of disappointment, she initially didn't seem to care. But John still explained in simple and empathetic language that Kelly was still Billy's last living family member. He then gave her the photo album he had made, falsely claiming it was found in Billy's arms when he was found dead. Thanks to his simple trick, Kelly was finally touched. They continued their chat as Kelly brought John to her house. On their way, she told John who Billy was and why she finally cut off her relations with her father. She revealed that as a father, Billy was undeniably selfish. The last time she and her mother met Billy was in prison. At that moment, Billy said that before being released, he wanted to straighten out a few things so they could start over from scratch. However, Kelly's mother didn't believe him, and that last meeting eventually led to a huge argument with Billy, where they were separated by the prison guards. Upon arrival at her house, Kelly showed John a photo of Billy with Jumbo, a friend of her father's from when they served in the military. She said that Jumbo had once tried to look for Billy, but she refused to help him. She then gave John the photo and told him that even though she was shocked to hear that her father had passed away, she didn't want to attend her father's funeral because she was too disappointed with her father. She also thanked John for going to such lengths to tell her the news. John, on the other hand, still hoped that Kelly might come to her father's funeral, which he was preparing. After leaving Kelly's house, before returning to his office, John decided to meet Jumbo at a nursing home that Kelly had told him about. There, he was welcomed, because Kelly had already informed Jumbo that he would be coming. When they chatted, Jumbo told John who Billy was when they were on duty together back then. He revealed that even though Billy was indeed a good guy, he was also the reason why Jumbo had ended up in the nursing home. Jumbo further said that back when they were still on duty, Billy had started drinking heavily, which eventually caused major difficulties for him. But even so, the two of them remained good friends. Shortly after, on the way back to the office, John finally had to accept that once again, he would be the only one attending the funeral, because both Kelly and Jumbo were definitely not coming. But despite that, he still did the best for the funeral. He chose a simple coffin and designed a nice tombstone for Billy. He also chose a cemetery location that had a particularly good view. After finishing the funeral arrangements, John returned to his office and packed up all his belongings. Then, when he was still packing, he received a phone call, which turned out to be from Kelly, telling him that she apparently planned to come to London. John was so happy to hear that. That afternoon, before meeting Kelly, John returned to his house to collect some of Billy's belongings that he had found in the apartment so he could show them to her. Upon meeting, John explained to Kelly that he had chosen Billy's tombstone to be dark red, the same color as Billy's military beret back when he was in the military. At that moment, Kelly saw that John was truly trying to give a last shred of dignity to someone she herself had long forgotten, and she was utterly touched. That short meeting opened a small door for John. For the first time in a very long time, he finally spoke to someone not because of work, but simply because he cared. Kelly even invited John to chat after they finished Billy's funeral on Friday, to which John agreed. Since that meeting, John, who had been living alone for a very long time, began to imagine for the first time what it would be like if he had someone in his life like Kelly right after his assignment. He imagined his future might be a little different. The day before Billy's funeral, John decided to buy Kelly a small gift, but as he left the shop, a tragic incident befell him. As he crossed the road, he was suddenly hit by a bus, and unfortunately, he died instantly. After the accident, John was brought to a church for his funeral. The irony was that despite helping people get a dignified funeral, John himself had no one to attend his funeral ceremony. There was no family, no friends, and no one to remember him. No one expressed any emotion but the priest who read prayers for him and accompanied him to his final resting place. At the very same time, Billy's funeral proceeded, and thanks to John's hard work, it was different from all the cases he had handled before. Many people came to attend the funeral. Kelly was there, along with Jumbo and other people who knew Billy when he was still alive. They paid their last respects, and Billy was not alone at his funeral. At that moment, Kelly was waiting for John to arrive, but unfortunately, she did not know that John had passed away. Even when John's hearse passed right in front of her, she still didn't realize it. Later, when Billy's burial was over, Kelly also watched as John was buried nearby. Sadly, she did not know that the deceased was John. However, after everyone else had left, a magical moment happened. The spirits of the people John had taken care of appeared and surrounded his tomb. They stood there silently without saying a word, but symbolically showing warmth as if they were saying that he was not alone.
I wake up to the silence, no footsteps in the hall, just the echo of my breathing, filling up these empty walls. The sunlight feels so distant, like it's scared to touch my skin. And every day I wonder, when did loneliness begin? I talk to fading memories, 'cause they're all I'm holding on. The nights feel like forever when your heart has no one. I pour my tea for two, though I only drink for one, trying not to feel the weight of a life that's come undone. And I'm alone in my own shadow, too heavy now to hold. I keep waiting